it's important to understand the context in which a business operates, and obviously not all of them will be sensitive to the same external factors. Some are more reliant on supplies, on big volumes of expensive materials. Let's say a car manufacturer obviously will be hit more by price volatility on the raw materials market than a telecoms company, arguably, especially if that's a service provider and they don't make anything. Having said that, all of them operate in an ecosystem which is heavily interlinked, and price volatility for somebody who is hit on their bottom line by resource prices increasing and raw materials increasing has an effect on the economy in general, because it's usually linked with low price of oil, high price of oil, and everything's, you can't be hedged from the type of volatility in the market. So I think it's important to look at it from the perspective of how your business is going to operate in the next 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, and look at a long-term, take a long-term view on the system and say, even if the Industrial Revolution has been very, very efficient at providing material comfort, lifting billions out of poverty, and really increasing the general level of infrastructure of countries, etc., etc., it has done so in a context where resources were still plentiful, reasonably cheap, and the externalities were not that visible. It's a completely different field now, and the externalities and the negative impact of the linear economy, whereby we take something out of the ground, make products, and sell them on to consumers who discard them, is extremely visible and acknowledged by business and politicians alike. So there is a really strong case now to look at circularity from a profitability point of view, from a resilience point of view, from a long-term point of view, and simply because whether you're a big business leader or a citizen, you are impacted by that environment in the same way. Nobody really wants to be in a system which is crumbling. The digital revolution is happening regardless of whether we think we're going towards more circularity or staying linear. But what is definitely interesting to look at is what enablement potential the IT revolution brings to circularity if we want to apply it. You say, well, IT and digital and data, big data and the tracking of assets and the embedded product information can help monitor materials better. You can say we can have almost an identity fiche for every product embedded in the product, telling you what it's made of, how it can be repaired, how it can be recycled. But before you go into that, there's also all the power that was brought about from digital revolution to virtualization. There are a lot of assets that don't really need to either exist anymore or don't need to exist in such large numbers. Sharing platforms, the peer-to-peer, shared mobility, you can basically deliver the same number of kilometers per passenger without having to multiply the number of cars, because that's seamlessly integrated. You can open a shared car door with your phone, and all of that really contributes to a much better use of the physical assets. And going back to what I was saying previously, the tracking and the monitoring and the information in the product is also vital, because if you look at all the volume of stuff that goes through an economy and that gets at some point labeled as waste at the end of the pipe, a lot of times you will talk to end-of-life or waste management companies. They will say, well, I have a pile of stuff, I don't exactly know what's in it, therefore I have to treat it as waste. But if you know at all times exactly how it's made, you can know where your feedstocks are, you can know what you can do with it, and suddenly the difference between the two piles of stuff is the one that has information attached to it has a value. I think we approach it from a systems perspective and say, incremental innovation is very important, but it will only get us so far because it doesn't challenge the fundamentals of how we do things. And we really try to, whoever we engage with, and whether that's education experts, policymakers, business leaders, we really try to make the case that it is a system shift and that we have to profoundly question the way we're doing things now in order to move towards a model which is more positive and more promising on all fronts. So to answer that question, I don't think we would go deeper on one of the two angles, because it's really all-encompassing. I think that we have a good illustration of that with the New Plastics Economy initiative, which stemmed out of a report that we put together as a result of a collaboration between ourselves, McKinsey, and the World Economic Forum, and decided to look at one iconic material in the current linear economy, and plastic is a good one. And the initiative brings together all the companies, well, all the representatives from all the sectors, from chemical companies all the way down to municipal waste managers, to collectively problem solve and think, what do we need to agree on, what do we need to reform? We know what system we operate in, we know the percentages of losses of non-recyclable materials that are out there, and we know the impacts that it has. We agree on a common vision going forward for a system that actually works and means that plastics never become waste, never end up in the wrong place, never end up in the oceans, never end up in resources, and the value of these materials is not lost. So we keep it in the economy where it should be, productive, and not outside becoming a problem. So that's what we mean by system change, really looking at from start to finish. You really do need to engage absolutely everyone in the company. Now the starting point will be different regarding the size of company, the type of market it operates. Of course, what we do see is that having high-level, CEO-level buy-in really is crucially important, because that means it trickles down at all levels. And of course, there are, in the big companies and the current model, sometimes it's critical to engage the people dealing with the supply side, because sometimes they're just incentivized to go for the cheapest option, and that could be detrimental from a circularity point of view. The KPIs, people who are really looking at metrics all the time and running the business according to these KPIs are people obviously that need to be engaged, but as I said, it's from shop floor to CEO and C-suite executive. They have to buy into that model because it's a better model for business. And I think the more people you can expose to the solid rationale of the circular economy, the better, because that creates the momentum. It's simply a better system. We released a report last year in a knowledge partnership with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development on the circularity potential for India, looking at mobility, nutrition, and the built environment sector, and quantified the gains compared to a current development scenario in terms of GDP equivalent, but also in terms of CO2, and in both cases it's a very compelling set of statistics. Some of these countries which don't have yet a very heavy infrastructure can look at their development pathways in two different ways. You can either push the levers of linear economy to the max and say we're going to play catch up with the externality that entails, or you can try and look for opportunities to leapfrog some of that and go directly to circular systems. So that's what we wanted to highlight.